It's about history, policy, and impact. A new perspective on current affairs, bringing experience, insight, civility, and scholarship to the urgent issues of today. It's about our past, present, and future. Your host, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and journalist, Douglas Blackman. From the University of Virginia's Miller Center, this is American Forum.
Welcome back to American Forum. Americans have been embroiled in a passionate national debate over the past 2 years, driven by what appeared to be a surge of questionable killings of African American citizens by police and a growing awareness that our country incarcerates more people than any society in the world. Approximately 7 million citizens are in prison or under oversight of parole and probation systems. There is a growing sense that our system may be designed to be unfair to minority groups, and our confidence in police officers and prosecutors whose good faith we counted on to ensure that only true criminals were arrested has been rocked by a series of dubious shootings of black citizens and revelations of law enforcement misconduct. In this episode, we return to our ongoing series, What Now? New Dialogues on Race in America. Joining us again is Bryan Stevenson, a lawyer, founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, the architect of a landmark U.S. Supreme Court ruling that mandatory life sentences for juveniles are unconstitutional, and author of the best-selling book, Just Mercy, a story of justice and redemption. Thanks for being here.
Delighted to be with you.
So I just cited a number in the introduction, 7 million Americans who are under the umbrella of the criminal justice system in some fashion, more than any country in the world, maybe more than at any point, any society in human history. You have waged a battle all through your adult life, really, as an attorney to try to change those things and to try to reform the criminal justice system, and in particular, the ways that it appears to be implicitly or explicitly unfair to minorities and African Americans. But I want to ask you about what appears to me the phenomenon that as the system has in fact become more fair, which it has, and it treats people more equally, regardless of race and other things, than it once did. But one of the effects of that is that you now have more people receiving the treatment of a draconian system. Are we able to make this a system that is just for everyone as opposed to one that is simply equal for everyone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that one of the problems is that the theory was if we took away discretion, we would get to more equality, more fairness. And the truth is that we haven't really done that. So I think most people make that contention by pointing to, say, the evolution of mandatory sentencing. But the truth of it is that we mandated certain sentences. Judges no longer have discretion, but that didn't eliminate discretion. It just shifted the discretion from judges to prosecutors. If you and I go down the street and we walk into the same store and you take a pack of chewing gum and I take a pack of chewing gum and we both walk out and we both get arrested, the prosecutor can say, oh, Professor Blackman, I'm just going to charge this a misdemeanor. You're a local professor, I respect you. They can also say to me, no, you committed a serious crime. It's going to be robbery because you had a stick in your pocket, and we're going to make. And I could be looking at a mandatory sentence of 15 years in prison while you go home. And that's a discretionary choice made by that prosecutor. So I don't actually think we've made things all that fairer. But I don't think we've actually seen that increase in fairness. If anything, I think because it's hidden, it's less reviewable. We've made it easier for the system to operate in ways that are fundamentally unfair.
Part of what you're describing is also this phenomenon of how very few people who are charged with a crime actually receive a trial, and that instead the judges are never really involved except as a rubber stamp at the end of a plea negotiation process. That's
exactly right. But even if they were involved in trials, if the person is convicted, they'd be forced to impose these really extreme sentences. And we moved to this system because we didn't trust people to be as political about the administration of criminal justice as the politicians that were leading this charge to mass incarceration. And I think they were leading the charge to mass incarceration because there was this underlying narrative of racial difference that was looking for a new place to vent itself. I really think that. You have these laws that on the face of them never use the word black or white, but are almost completely enforced in racialized ways. We had these disparities in sentencing between crack cocaine and powder cocaine that could not be explained in any other way, other than the kind of racial context from which they were administered. And the indifference to that, I think, is the real challenge for us, because I don't think we responded to that problem with the kind of urgency that we should have. And now we're seeing the manifestation of it with police officers shooting unarmed black boys and men on the streets, and people being stopped and frisked on the streets in New York City, just like they are in places in Mississippi and Alabama.
Is it your sense that there is an increase in the number of those sorts of incidents that is occurring, or is it that because there's now a camera in everybody's hands that we are seeing it, and that essentially what's happening now has been happening at the same rate for a very long time? It's just that in the past we didn't have the glaring evidence of exactly what it was.
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think these problems have always existed. Police violence directed at people of color it's been going on for decades, and most social disturbances over the last 50 years in communities of color have been triggered by police violence. Because when you're black in this country, you are presumed dangerous and guilty. And every person of color, one way or another, learns that. And it doesn't matter how much education you get. I have to tell my students, I don't care how many degrees you get, you're still going to be facing a presumption of dangerousness and guilt when you walk out on those streets. And that's burdensome, it's exhausting, and you get tired of it. And then when you see it manifesting itself in some lethal way, this time on camera, it enrages you because you've been dealing with this burden your whole life. And so, no, I don't think there's anything new about it. I think if there's anything new, it's our ability to prove it, to document it. People have said that when that African-American man was shot in North Charleston by a police officer in the back while he's running away, people have said it's not possible that a police officer there would do that but for the camera. And I think that's the real challenge. And what we're not talking about enough, in my opinion, is why it is so overwhelming for people of color, why it ought to be overwhelming for everyone to be living in a society where you're presumed dangerous and guilty, where you have to bear this burden. I was telling some young kids, I said, when I grew up, my grandfather taught me, he'd say these things that are painful to hear, but he would say, don't ever forget you are black. When people forget they're black, they get hurt. I moved to Montgomery in the 80s, and I was looking for a place to live, and I just couldn't find housing because the bulletin board was still using racially restricted language for housing, a 2-bedroom apartment available for a white man and woman, that kind of thing. And I called the realtor, and he said, I got 6 places, just go on over there, the doors are unlocked, just walk inside. And I got to the neighborhood, and it was not an entirely black neighborhood. I was about to walk inside, and I heard my grandfather saying, don't forget you're black. And I didn't feel comfortable going into that neighborhood, into those homes. I was a practicing lawyer. And then the next day I heard about someone being pulled out of a house that they were visiting just to see if it was a place they wanted to rent. It was beaten by the police and didn't have the chance to give voice to him just being a potential renter. We're just still dealing with the symptoms of our history of white supremacy, of narratives of racial difference when we talk about police violence. And we got to commit to dealing with the implicit bias and the explicit bias that motivates that aggression and that violence. That's the only way we can make progress.
The case you write the most about in your book, Just Mercy, is the story of a man named Walter Mcmillian in Monroeville, Alabama, the famous place where the fictitious Atticus Finch came from. But tell us the story of that case.
Yeah, well, Walter Mcmillian was an African-American man living in Monroeville, and there was a terrible crime in the mid-'80s, late 80s, of a young white woman murdered in a downtown cleaner. And the police couldn't solve the crime, and the whole community was outraged and upset. The gun sales had tripled. They were talking about impeaching the sheriff or the prosecutor if they couldn't make an arrest. And so we believe they decided to arrest Mr. Mcmillian, not because they really believed he committed the crime, but because he was having an interracial affair with a young white woman. And they arrested him. They actually put him on death row.
And what year was this again?
This was 1987 when he was arrested. He was placed on death row before trial. It's the only case I've ever worked on where the client spent 15 months on death row pre-trial. So the papers would say, death row defendant Walter Mcmillian will be arraigned tomorrow, death row defendant. And they were able to convict him and sentence to death. The amazing thing was that at the time of the crime, he was actually raising money for his sister's church. And there were about 30 people of color with him, 11 miles from the crime scene. So they knew he was innocent. And when he was arrested, they went to the sheriff and said, "You've got the wrong man." They were ignored. The trial lasted a day and a half. He was convicted of capital murder. He was actually sentenced to life without parole by the jury. And the trial judge, whose name was Robert E. Lee Key, overrode the jury's verdict and imposed the death penalty. And he spent the next 6 years on death row. When I started working on the case, they had convicted him based on the testimony of one man. And I found out that this man had been coerced to testify falsely. He just admitted to me that it was all a lie. And then he told me that he had been recorded trying to persuade them that he shouldn't do this. And so we started looking, and we found tapes where the police had interrogated this man while they were coercing him to testify falsely. And for some bizarre reason, they tape recorded those sessions. So the witness was actually on the tape saying, quote, "You want me to frame an innocent man for murder, and I don't feel right about that." And the police officer was saying, "Well, you better give us what we want, or we're going to put you on death row." And he made lots of statements to lots of people that he was lying, that this was all a frame-up. They got some other people to testify falsely. And they then suppressed all of that evidence. Obviously, they didn't give it to the lawyers or give it to the jury. And so we found the evidence, went to court, and there's a case called Brady versus Maryland, which holds that the state is obligated to turn over anything that is favorable to the defendant. And when they fail to turn that over, your conviction is unreliable and you're entitled to a new trial. And that was the basis upon which we won relief.
And you have also been involved in the setting free of any number of other people, including a couple of cases out of the New Orleans area that you also write about, but where you had men, African-American men, who were sentenced to life, or I believe life, as juveniles in the 1960s, in the early 1960s, and are still at Angola.
But there are lots and lots of other cases that we've worked on where we've seen these same kinds of problems of reliability. In fact, in the death penalty context, I just got someone released last year who became the 152nd person proved innocent since the return of the modern death penalty. We're now up to 156. That means that for every 9 people we have executed in the United States, we've been able to prove one person is innocent. It's a shocking rate of error. We started working on cases involving children sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. And we saw the same level, even higher levels, of unreliability. And I worked on a bunch of cases in Louisiana where these young kids, 16 and 17, would be rounded up in the early 60s, accused of some crime, convicted, and then either sentenced to death by execution or given life imprisonment without parole. And for many of our clients who were at Angola in the 70s and 80s, Angola is a plantation prison. And when people were sent there, they were required to go and pick cotton as part of their inmate labor. And you had a bunch of people who said, "I'm not going to pick cotton. You've told me I'm going to die in prison. You've condemned me to death in prison. I've been abused my whole life. I'm not going to pick cotton." And they'd get written up, and they'd get disciplinary after disciplinary after disciplinary. And eventually, in the 20th century, they started moving away from some of these really egregious inmate labor practices. And so now we've won relief and we're going before the parole board, and our big challenge is they have all these disciplinaries because they refused to pick cotton in the 1970s and 80s. In order to win their freedom, we have to talk about why a plantation prison insisted on that kind of labor. They didn't need the cotton for business. They weren't actually marketing that stuff. It was to create the appearance of something that felt like control, right? And in many ways, the challenge of our history is made manifest in cases just like that. But we started working on those cases the way, because we were really concerned about the problem of unreliability throughout the system. I'm persuaded we have more innocent people in jails and prisons in America today than we've ever had in our history.
Well, in that number, 1 in 9, the demonstrable error rate, I mean, it's now a statistically reliable error rate based on the number of exonerations that have occurred. And it doesn't prove that approximately 10% of all convictions are in error, but it suggests the possibility of that, or something close to that.
That's right.
And if you apply that to 7 million people,
yes, that's right.
That suggests 700,000 innocent people having been convicted of these crimes.
Yes, and I think what is more problematic than the number is our silence in the face of that, our indifference. I mean, I don't know why you would still want to execute people when you know that the risk of executing an innocent person is so high. You can't justify it unless you don't care about the victimization of these folks, unless you are willing to tolerate the execution of innocent people if it empowers you in some other way. And that's the very definition of oppression, of abuse, of inequality, of injustice. There's no way to reconcile that mindset with something that you can call just. And that's the tragedy, I think, of our indifference, our silence, our apathy during this era of mass incarceration.
It's also striking that we have become a society in which there are no second chances, seemingly, and the system. I think you're correct. Certainly, the data would say the system continues to be disproportionately unkind and draconian to African Americans and other minorities, but it is also generally draconian now.
Yes.
And so you have suburban white kids in high school suddenly facing extraordinary punishments because they've made a sequence of foolish mistakes and now beginning to suffer in a way that probably in an earlier era they would not. And that's opened the eyes of some people to seeing people in their world finally facing up against all this. But we once were a country, we were founded as a country based on second chances. It's one of the most fundamental things. I mean, the state of Georgia was a place for convicts to go and get a second chance. And all through our history, the notion that you could redeem yourself and get a second chance, particularly if you were a white person, was embedded in the American psyche. That's something the Founding Fathers had some awareness of. React to this theory of mine, and that is a predominant view in, at least among white people in America, the ruling class of America. That's a predominant view that people should get a second chance, all the way up until the 1960s, when it finally comes to pass that African Americans have been able to first throw off the shackles of slavery, then throw off the shackles of Jim Crow and everything associated with that, and are finally in a position to say, we ought to be able to live in a world with second chances as well. And it's from that point forward that we become a society that says, no, there's no second chances for anybody anymore.
Yeah, I think that there is some force to that. I mean, I think it's a little more nuanced for me. I think what's happened in the last 30, 40 years, people have been unwilling to say, I believe in compassion. I believe in mercy. What we've been saying is, I'm tough. I'm angry. I'm going to beat up on the people who I don't like. I'm going to punch that guy in the face. That rhetoric and that rhetorical vision has emerged, which has left no room for second chances. We've reduced people to their worst act. And so if you tell a lie, you are just a liar. If you take something, you're just a thief. If you kill someone, you're just a killer. And everybody has been complicit in that, including the media, right? One of the things, we did a little study of the New York Times, Washington Post, et cetera, and they would use the word killer or rapist or thief whenever they described someone accused of those crimes who was poor, who was black, who had no status. But when affluent people committed those same crimes, people who had identity, when a police officer commits that crime, they're called a police officer accused of murder, goes on trial. Firefighter, and even their family members, firefighter's son accused of rape will go on trial. We give them an identity that is not the crime, but for the poor and people of color, we make them the crime. That's how we introduce them. And these labels, I think, have created a world where second chances is seen as something that the weak do. Compassion, that's something for the weak. That's for losers. And I do think it's completely incompatible with our history. Because the truth is that we all want second chances when we fall down. If we tell a lie, we don't want to be judged a liar the rest of our lives. If we want to make a mistake, we want mercy, we want compassion. If you want mercy, if you want compassion, you have to show mercy. You have to show compassion. You can't expect things that you don't give. And we haven't given very much of that in American politics over the last 40 years. I think one of the reasons why it's so hard to talk about racial justice, why it's hard to talk about our history of enslavement and lynching and segregation is that we're so fearful of being punished for the history. Like a lot of people don't want to talk about, we're trying to put up markers at slavery sites and lynching sites and all of that, and people don't want us to do it because they're afraid that they might be punished. And I keep saying, I have no interest in punishing people in America for the things we did during the time of enslavement. But I am unwilling to be silent about those things and allow this narrative to continue. And collectively, we are not doing that in our criminal justice system. We're saying, you fall down, you stay down. You're just bad. Bad, bad, bad. Criminal, criminal, criminal. And I think that's a very unhealthy thing, not just for the people in that system. I think it's a healthy thing for the society as a whole.
When I talk about bad things that have happened in our past and the great social crime of slavery and what came after slavery in American life, I often will hear, particularly from a young person, someone will say, well, you're right that was a terrible thing, but it doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm 21 years old today. My family moved to America from Poland in 1915, and so slavery was over. No connection to me, has nothing to do with me. And what I tend to say to that person is that it's not a question of whether we have inherited some guilt, but it's a question of how do we respond to the knowledge of that about our own families or about our country, and that we can be judged for.
Absolutely, and I think that, it's our awareness and our knowledge. You don't have to be personally implicated to be implicated, right? It doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter what your personal lineage is. If you're living in a society where they start picking up people who are black or brown and putting them in camps, and you do nothing, you are implicated. If we get to the point in this country where someone starts rounding up Mexicans and sending them back because they think they are rapists. If we get to the point in this country where we actually say we're going to ban all the Muslims, I feel an obligation to say, today I am a Mexican. Today I am a Muslim. Because I cannot be indifferent to that kind of racism, that kind of victimization, and be a whole, healthy human being.
And so, because we don't want to be opaque, what you're really saying is if the things that Donald Trump, currently candidate for president of the United States, were to come to pass.
Yes, that's right. I would have to stand with anyone who is victimized because of their religion or their ethnicity. Being who I am, the great-grandson of an enslaved person, of people who were lynched and terrorized, this child of people who were humiliated every day by Jim Crow and segregation, I have no choice. And it doesn't matter that I'm not the person who said, ban the Mexicans and the Muslims. It doesn't matter that I'm not ostensibly Mexican and Muslim. I am disrupted by any policy in my country that would do that. In the same way that the Polish immigrant's child has to make peace with this history that has created a narrative of racial difference, it still creates these shadows and these we're not free in this country. I think we're still haunted. We're a post-genocidal society that has never owned up to the genocide that we were complicit in.
At the same time, I find that people are largely at a loss as to what to actually do. I mean, an example of that is that it's a little comical to say this, but most prison systems don't subscribe to don't have HBO on their cable package, but they do have all sorts of public affairs programming like this show. And so this program is seen by lots of inmates across the country. And I get letters from them because we talk about this issue all the time. I've got a big stack of them on my desk. And so I still don't have a policy, but what do we do as citizens?
Yeah, well, I think it is better to respond. We get hundreds and hundreds of requests for legal help every week. And we have a group of people that we call our intake team, and they've been just bombarded. And the more we do stuff, the more we get. And we've been wrestling with this too, because it's now taking a lot of time. But I am persuaded that even when you say no, it's still important, or I can't help you, it's still important. Because to be rendered invisible, to never be heard, to never even know you've been heard, that's a kind of fate. The book that changed my life when I was a kid, growing up and still struggling to overcome all the bigotry and racism that I encountered as a child, was Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. And why the book was so transformative to me was that he articulated this identity of someone who can't be seen, who can't be heard, and how painful and burdensome it was. And when I kind of read that, I thought, you know what, I got to figure out a way to be seen and heard. It doesn't matter to me if people agree. It doesn't matter to me if people change. It does, but I can't be turned around by that. But to not be heard would be to actually be one of those invisible people. And that's what's powerful when organized communities of incarcerated people, or young kids that are angry about police violence, or students, or any group stands up and says, we need you to hear us. What's powerful about that is that it is the most, I think, venerable tradition in American history. The tradition of insisting that the democracy pay attention to inequality and oppression and injustice. Because the democracy that doesn't pay attention to that becomes corrupt, and a corrupt democracy fails. And we are all tied to this vision of a better tomorrow, which we can't get to until we deal with these problems. And so you have to respond to the people who say, please hear me. And sometimes even if the response isn't fulfilling and adequate, it's still important.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Bryan Stevenson, The book is Just Mercy, a story of justice and redemption. We hope you'll join this conversation with American Forum on the Miller Center Facebook page or by following us on Twitter at Douglas Blackman or at American Forum TV. To send us a comment, watch other episodes, download podcasts, or read a transcript, visit us at millercenter.org, American Forum. I'm Doug Blackman. See you next week.